I am starting a new sketchbook today and I'm so excited. I have been dying to just paint constantly, so we're going to paint with some watercolors in this sketchbook today. So this is just a really cheap watercolor, dry activated watercolor set, and I also got a new set of water brush pens. These are really easy to use. You just open this up and put water in here. Then you can squeeze around here. It says push here, and it'll squeeze water out from the brush. So you can just easily add water to anything. So I have a sketch ready so we can just paint right away. So we have a portrait sketch and a butterfly, and then I'm thinking of just doing like the color palette that I'm gonna use just like in these circles that I drew back here, and then maybe just like a single solid color for the entire background, maybe like a dark color. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So it's finally time to start painting. I have been so excited to start this new sketchbook, and I thought I'd take you along with this little journey of starting this sketchbook. It's always so exciting to start a new sketchbook, and I love to keep sketchbooks and use multiple sketchbooks at the same time. I just like to express creativity in different ways on different paper, and it's just lots of fun to just draw and paint in sketchbooks. I love having sketchbooks, and I just recently made a video about like a bunch of sketchbook tips and like how to fill up your sketchbooks basically, and I really encourage you to watch that video, especially before starting a new sketchbook. There's a ton of my best advice from my experience of having sketchbooks that I included in that video that any artist and creative would benefit from, especially if you keep sketchbooks for drawing, or if you use it for ideas, that sort of thing. Just definitely watch that video. But for now, we're just gonna paint and chat today. I always get questions about this like shape sketchbook that I have. It's from Picarar, the artist and designer. She makes these really cool sketchbooks with herself and other artists in mind for like the kinds of paper and stuff. So this is their latest version of the original sketchbook, which is a bleed-proof sketchbook with coated paper, and this is the textured paper version that I've just been excited to try because paint is kind of weird on the original sketchbook, the coated paper version, the like glossy paper version. So I've just been excited to try the new textured sketchbook, and this one is super chunky. It's actually the same amount of pages as the other sketchbook, which is surprising, but this is a really heavyweight paper, so it can handle wet paint or inks pretty well. So I've just been dying to try it to see how it holds up, and I really enjoyed using this. Of course, I had the sketchbook in mind of primarily for painting, so when the first thing I did in here was painting, and it turned out really well, and the paper didn't really warp at all, and so I just was really pleased with how it's been going. And I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning when I showed you this watercolor set, but this is an older set that I have. Like I did mention that it's very cheap. Just the water brush pens are new, and the sketchbook is new, but that dry activated pan watercolor set is a few years old, and I've been on a kick of just using my older art supplies, especially ones that I've abandoned or stopped using for whatever reason. I've just been on a kick of just going back to those art supplies and using them and relearning them, or just like having fun with them again. I also made a video about that, just talking about art supplies and how important it is to just use your art supplies, especially instead of buying new art supplies. For a while, I really enjoyed buying and trying new art supplies, because I had fun doing that and trying new stuff, and eventually finding art supplies that I loved, like paint markers that I discovered the past like year or so. But
with all the other art supplies that I have to remind myself that I love those too, and I bought them and tried them for a reason. And I hit pan on a bunch of these watercolor pans, so that told me that I did enjoy using this at one point. And I mean, the colors are not awesome, they're pretty dull, but maybe I'm just not an expert in watercolor. It's just not really something that I really truly like taught myself how to use. I mean, it was one of the first like painting mediums that I used as a child. It was like in art classes they taught you how to use watercolors because they're probably easier to clean. They didn't want a bunch of kids with acrylic paint all over them, so they had us using watercolors, just not as messy, so that makes sense. But they didn't really teach us like art techniques. It's just kind of like, you know, do some colors. But in like high school and maybe like middle school, they definitely taught us about like values and stuff and like how to use colors, and I definitely taught myself how to like blend colors and stuff. And here in this, I kind of just took layering to my advantage, which is something that is super important with watercolor, and definitely the amount of water that you're using. But I will say that maybe these cheaper, dull colors are not really giving me a great advantage, but I also just didn't want to go too crazy on the color and the wet paint on here. Like I said, I was trying the sketchbook out for the first time, so I was still keeping in mind that I don't really know how paint works on this paper, so I didn't want to, you know, put too much water. But it ended up turning out really well, and I also used my wet watercolors in here, and I plan to use gouache too, and maybe even my acrylic paints. The wet watercolors is basically just like watercolor in a paint tube, like it's not like dry, which I discovered this year, I think, and it reminded me a lot of gouache, so I really had a fun time trying that out for the first time recently, because I've only ever used these dry activated ones, of course, since like I said, since like as a child, that's the only watercolor I ever heard of. So while trying new art supplies has been fun, I really got to pick up my old art supplies again. Like, I haven't really been drawing with colored pencils that much. I will pick it up sometimes to, you know, add a little bit of detail on a drawing or a painting or something. I did that here in this watercolor spread, but like I haven't really been just like coloring with them or drawing with them just with the colored pencils, and I've been doing that a lot lately since I've inspired myself to use my art supplies again, and I've ended up having so much fun with that. So yeah, I just encourage you once again, if you've missed that video where I talked about art supplies, to use your older art supplies and don't worry too much about buying new art supplies. I mean, if you ran out of something, go ahead and restock, but don't go too quickly into like getting a bunch of new art supplies that you might not like, or it, you know, might be a waste of your money. Or, you know, you just abandon them in like a few months because you just didn't enjoy using it, or maybe you didn't know how to use them, that sort of thing. And also, it's just great to not fall into the overconsumption of it all, of just having a bunch of art supplies. I used to have like every color of acrylic paint, these little like craft paints. I had like hundreds of little paint tubes, and I thought that it was so wasteful to have all of that, especially when I wasn't using every color, and most of the colors weren't that different from each other, and like I could have just mixed those colors if I wanted, like a really light green or something like that. So once I gave those away, I just felt so much calmer and a lot less overwhelmed, and then I taught myself how to use the primary colors to mix any color that I needed, which is a painting hack basically, or basically color theory. But anyway, now we're picking up the colored pencils. These are Prismacolor colored pencils. They have a couple of like different sets that have different colors. I have 2 different sets that I've just had since I was in like high school. I have not bought like a new colored pencil in like years. Like these have been the ones that I've loved and been using, like I said, for like years and years. And some of these are like really tiny, so that tells you how long I've had them for. I've sharpened them so many times. And something I discovered with maybe the watercolor was still a little wet, and these are not watercolor pencils either. The colored pencils got like really smooth and like sort of wet as I was drawing, especially when I did that little like baby hair swoop. It felt like kind of wet. It almost felt like, I mean, I don't use lip liners, but it kind of felt like one of those pencils where they're like really smooth and a little oily. It kind of felt like that at some points, especially maybe because it was still wet, because at other times it didn't really happen. It just kind of took the texture like a colored pencil would on paper. But I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I have used watercolor pencils before. I don't know where they went. Probably lost them when I moved a few times. But watercolor like pencils kind of work where you just kind of like draw with them and then add a little bit of water. Those are really interesting. So yeah, I thought that like I said with this watercolor, I thought that the colors were a little dull, and I didn't want to layer too much because I didn't want to make it too wet and warp the paper, even though that didn't happen, but I was still keeping that in mind. So I was using some colored pencils to try to fix that a little bit, add a little bit of texture, add some details, and I feel like I lost some of the details in the hair a bunch with the watercolors, because I was trying to use different color or different like shades of red, and that wasn't really coming through very well. So I tried to just outline them again with the colored pencils, and then that didn't really work very well, but it still looks pretty good. And then I thought to also fix some of the details with paint markers. Paint markers save everything. I love using paint markers, and yeah, they're just bright and lovely and awesome. Yeah, these are so fun to use, and I was still afraid to use a bunch of watercolor on this paper, so I didn't do the butterfly justice, so I just covered over that with the black paint marker, and now it looks matte and cool. And this was just like a fun page. Hope you enjoyed painting and chatting with me, and I'm excited to continue in this sketchbook, so make sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!